Hello and welcome back. Thank you to Minister Wiebes for his video message. I'm very honored to have him participate today. We're going to go on to the next thematic session, which is going to be chaired by Patrick Cnubben, who is the manager for hydrogen and LNG at the New Energy Coalition. I'll allow him to introduce the speakers of the session. I did want to make a brief announcement that if you look on if you're watching us on the platform, we have started a forum thread for this session where viewers can post questions. Any questions that are not addressed in the talk will be addressed online later. I'm going to give the floor to Patrick.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, attendees, and very welcome speakers to the session with the name Repurposing and Certification of Natural Gas Infrastructure. We hope to bring to the table some new insights, new developments from, let's say, the Dutch, but also from the Californian, British Columbian perspective. Thank you for the speakers. We have 4 speakers. We have Mr. Henri, we have Mr. John Quinn, we have Professor Jack Brouwer and Mr. Rob Harvey, which I will introduce gradually at each session. We'll start with Mr. Henri. Henri is the business manager for the chemicals group at Groningen Seaports. Groningen Seaports is the port authority in our northern Netherlands region. And I think Henri has some very interesting things to explain to us regarding the Northern Netherlands Hydrogen Investment Plan. And I think, Henri, you will also mention this big announcement made today as well regarding, let's say, specific parties partaking in this very specific project. So, Henri, may I give the word to you? And let's carry on. And to the audience, enjoy the talk of Henri.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. First, let me start by introducing myself briefly. I'm the business manager chemicals for the Port Authority Groningen Seaports, which is the port authority for the northern part of the Netherlands. We operate 2 ports, Eemshaven, our port of energy, a lot of energy consumption in that port, and also the port of Delfzijl, which is more focused on renewable chemicals. I don't know how to introduce the slides in the presentation that I have arranged. Maybe you can assist on that, Patrick. Thanks. So let me briefly give you introduce the presentation. If we look at the northern part of the Netherlands, there are a lot of ingredients already in place to build this hydrogen infrastructure in the northern part. As you can see on this slide, there are private and public investments that I will talk about later during this short presentation. But also, if you look at talent, knowledge institutes, but also the assets that are already in place, but not to forget also the port infrastructure that we as Groningen Seaports do operate. So on the one hand, the energy production, on the other hand, the energy consumption within the chemical cluster, but also the public off-takers in the region that form all ingredients that can enable this hydrogen economy in the northern part of the Netherlands. If you want to move to the next slide, Patrick, here you can see a nice overview of the Netherlands, more focusing on the northern part of the Netherlands. If we look in history to the northern part of the Netherlands, I think the Netherlands is very famous for, as it is called in abroad, the Dutch disease, which was inflicted due to the gas reservoir, the biggest on-land European gas reservoir that was found former century in the northern part of the Netherlands, which built the foundation for the current gas infrastructure in the Netherlands, but also in going abroad towards Germany, but also to the UK and Belgium. And at this point, GasUnie, which is a partner in the project that we want to further discuss during the presentation, lay down the gas infrastructure in the Netherlands. At this moment, that's a parallel gas infrastructure, which is also capable to transport hydrogen through this gas infrastructure. You see on this slide Eemshaven, which has capabilities to import green hydrogen, but also other gases, but also the interconnector towards the offshore wind farms in combination with the chemical cluster, but also the gas infrastructure itself, gives all ingredients for the project, which is called NoordH2, which I will discuss in this presentation. If you want to move to the next slide, here we emphasize on the fact that if you compare several clusters, areas in worldwide, this slide gives a nice overview of all ingredients that are necessary to build this ecosystem, so to say. It's consisting out of manufacturing, also production, transport, and end users. And what we did, we compared several areas worldwide, from Japan towards California, but also in Europe, several regions. The Northern Netherlands has a lot of production already existing. For example, in the chemical industry, hydrogen is one of the base ingredients for production of all wide variety of chemicals. Also, the transport capabilities are already in place. As you saw in the previous slide, the gas infrastructure, which connects Netherlands towards the rest of Europe, is already of a very high level, which is also the reason why the Netherlands is the gas roundabout of Europe at this point. So transport is now not really an issue. And also on the end user side, chemical industry, but also in public transport, but also private transport, so buses, cars, etc., already in place, and also looking for other end users in the region. But the existing end users are an enabler for this production. If you want to go to the next slide, I want to emphasize that together with GasUnie and also together with Shell and Groningen Seaports, we presented this NoordH2. And as Patrick already mentioned in his introduction, this morning we had wonderful news that also RWE, the German energy producer, and Equinor, former Norwegian Statoil, also became partner of this NoordH2 project, in which we have a very ambitious plan to develop the hydrogen infrastructure in the northern part of the Netherlands. So you see here a phase 1, mature and scale up, and then expansion towards the rest of northwestern Europe in phase 2. Hydrogen production capacity starting from 5 to 10 petajoule per annum. We want to expand it to 100 petajoule per annum with the additional green hydrogen production cost, which has to ramp down. Otherwise, you have to be competitive in that way. You see here a nice overview of the ambition, investments needed, etc., but also the job that will be created. Of course, jobs are very important. Also, as a developing organization, as Groningen Seaports is, it's very important for our shareholder that jobs will be created. So that's the main issue during this scale up. If you go to the next slide, it gives you a nice overview of the implementation planning. It's very important on the short term that we expand the offshore wind capacity. There's already existing wind park on the North Sea, but which has to be expanded further, even to 11 gigawatts. It's very important that there is also governmental support for expansion of offshore wind capacity. That will bring more renewable electricity towards the area, which will enable, for example, RWE, but also other producers of hydrogen in the area to produce even larger hydrogen ecosystem and electrolyzers to fill in the hydrogen demand from industry, but also other end users. And of course, very important, the overall program management. And that's also one of the items that, for example, Patrick Cnubben with the New Energy Coalition plays an important role. And so it's really a coalition of the willing, so to say. If we go to the next slide, there's well, I don't think that most people can read it, but I think we can share also a report, because this slide is made out of a report that was published last couple of months ago, which gives an overview of hydrogen projects within the region. And as you can see, it's a very long list of not only on the production side, but also on transport and utilization of hydrogen. So I think it gives a nice overview on the ambition and willingness of the northern part to really make a shift from natural gas into hydrogen as a form of energy that is renewable, but also well, will be cost competitive towards natural gas. This list gives a nice overview of all that projects, and this in combination well, resulted in the grant of the European Commission towards a nice subsidy that will stimulate further development in the hydrogen economy in the northern part of the Netherlands. If we look at the next slide, the Northern Netherlands roadmap, also consisting of phase 1 and phase 2, as I previously described. It gives an overview of really nice projects that has to be realized. For now, it's already a list of more than 35 projects in place, which were combined in this Heaven project, which was granted by a European Commission subsidy, but that will be further expanded, and that's really a realistic ambition, I believe. If you go to the next slide, it gives a nice overview of timing, and that's also where the New Energy Coalition plays an important role to really interconnect all those projects within the implementation planning of all this kinds of projects. Last slide, I think it gives a nice overview of also newcomers to our region that were attracted because of the plans for green hydrogen. I think I'm very proud that I was part in this acquisition of Sky Energy. We will use renewable hydrogen to produce biojet fuel for our Royal airliner, KLM, in combination also with SAV Energy. And that, well, gives a nice momentum towards also new developments in the region. That brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'm looking forward to any questions. Back to you, Patrick.
Thank you. I had a glitch with my connection, but I'm back again, and I heard the story of Henri, which is, I think, tremendous, and it gives a good illustration on what we want to achieve in the Netherlands, and especially from, let's say, our heartland, our Hydrogen Valley region, where the port of some of the Groningen Seaports domain is the centerpiece. We agreed that if there are questions, we can pose them directly, or we'll wait until, let's say, we finish it all. but I think the best would be to continue to Mr. John Quinn. Let me shortly introduce him. Mr. Quinn is the Senior Manager of Renewable Gas Supply at Fortis, British Columbia. He's a professional engineer and a chartered engineer with 20 years of experience as an engineer and as a leader in the energy sector. And I'm very curious on, let's say, the presentation of Mr. Quinn. Mr. Quinn, may I give the word to you?
Yes, thank you, Patrick. Can you hear me? Coming through? Perfect. So I assume, yes, I see my first slide up, so I'm good to go, I assume? Yes, perfect. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here this morning representing Fortis BC and British Columbia. I'm certainly in a distinguished guest list, and Sabina, who I work with pretty closely here in Vancouver, I'm sure painted the current situation in Canada in terms of our soon to be released federal hydrogen strategy, and here in British Columbia we expect a provincial hydrogen roadmap soon, I think, is the latest time frame we've received. So what I'm going to talk about this morning is really high level look at some of the activities underway in Fortis BC in terms of how we will hopefully enable a connection between a provincial hydrogen roadmap and our federal hydrogen strategy. Just if you could move to the second slide really quickly. Perfect, thank you. 8 slides. I'm going to cover a brief introduction to Fortis Inc., then Fortis BC Energy Inc., which is a subsidiary based in British Columbia, and I'll move through the slide deck, touching on various aspects of recertification of natural gas infrastructure for hydrogen. Just want to point out or clarify at the very start that here in British Columbia and in Fortis, we're at the start of our hydrogen journey. So we, as of now, have not constructed any hydrogen production facilities, demonstration facilities. We're not moving any product in or gas infrastructure to our customers. So very much at the start of this journey, and I would say perhaps here in North America, representative of our status compared to Europe, maybe a little behind progress, but these forums this morning are fantastic in terms of setting the stage for international collaboration. Next slide, please. Fortis Inc., very quickly, Fortis Inc. has a North American footprint in Canada, the US, and the Caribbean, and Fortis BC Energy Inc., based in British Columbia, the western province of Canada, is shown in the top left-hand part of this screen. Next slide, please. About Fortis BC, we deliver about 21% of the total energy consumed in British Columbia. We've got about 1.1 million customers and 135 communities around the province. So we're probably one of the largest energy suppliers in BC. We're a dual fuel utility. Own and operate about 50,000 kilometers of natural gas infrastructure, that's high pressure and low pressure, and about 7,000 kilometers of electric infrastructure. We also operate BC's largest underground natural gas storage, and we operate 2 liquefied LNG facilities. So in terms of repurposing infrastructure for hydrogen, this is just a snapshot, I think, representative probably right across North America of utilities and gas infrastructure owner operators, and what are parts so the large sensitive receptors, for example, on our distribution network where hydrogen may have to be stripped out or mitigated in a certain way. LNG plants, in our case, is an example of that. In terms of renewable gas, so today Fortis delivers renewable gas in the form of RNG, renewable natural gas, or biomethane, pipeline quality product indistinguishable from natural gas. And it represents a small portion of our annual energy delivery, about less than 1%. I'm going to touch on this in a lot more detail, but over the coming decade, we plan to increase our renewable gas supply to about 15% of our total annual energy supply. And out to 2050, much the same as many other jurisdictions around the globe, the sheer volume of renewable product that we will need in our pipelines is quite large. So this is where hydrogen is coming into our horizon, and indeed it's part of our long-term planning right now. If you could move to the next slide really quickly. Thank you. So Fortis's clean growth pathway to 2050, it's effectively a diversified and what we hope is a flexible approach to approach British Columbia's energy needs. Our 30 by 30 plan represents an interim target, obviously by 2030, to avoid about 4 million tons of CO2. And again, that represents about 30% of our customers' emissions, 2007 baseline, or by 2030, in energy terms, about 15% of our energy will need to be renewable / low carbon. In terms of volume, I heard Henri mention petajoules. So in terms of petajoules, that will be about 30 petajoules. Our renewable gas pillar, shown on the left-hand side of this screen, it will contribute significantly to achieving this target, and estimated to contribute about 1.5 million tons of CO2 avoided emissions by 2030. Very recently, Fortis, we commissioned and very recently released a study to understand how a diversified pathway, one that uses both power and gas in our future, could perform using many of the actions we're currently undertaking to pursue our 30 by 30 target. This study, it's known as our Diversified Pathways Report. It's just been released, and on the right-hand side of this screen, you can see a chart that dictates two key pillars in terms of our long-term 2050 target. On the left-hand side, there is our current supply, which is primarily all natural gas, just under 200 petajoules. On the right-hand side is our 2050 modeled vision, whereby right now, because it's not based on net zero, there will be some fossil methane still in our system, but about 75% of the gaseous energy that we'll supply to our customers by that point in time will be about 75% renewable or low carbon. A significant transition, a monumental target to simply put out and look on a deck, but it's the reality. It's the pathway that we must follow. Next slide, please. In terms of renewable gas supply, this chart looks here in British Columbia, and the red line along the bottom, the red, blue, and orange lines represent our current 2030 and 2050 approximate renewable gas volumes required to achieve our 2030 and 2050 GHG reduction targets. Again, the key point is that these targets mean that by 2050, approximately 75% of the gas in our pipelines will not be conventional natural gas. It will be renewable / low carbon. The bars along the bottom represent available in province and some out of province renewable natural gas or biomethane, and in province hydrogen. So the solid green bar, that's the cumulative renewable natural gas from in province supplies bolstered by some of out of province supply, and the solid blue represents the cumulative H2 theoretical production capacity in British Columbia based on our very green power grid, and also our large in-province natural gas supplies to potentially generate blue hydrogen. It's expected at the 2050 that renewable natural gas will provide a significant portion of our targets, but hydrogen will be necessary in the long term in order to meet our long-term targets. We see both renewable gases, renewable natural gas, and hydrogen playing a large part of our low carbon future. So having said that, next slide, please. Transitioning to hydrogen in BC, I missed Sabina's earlier presentation, but I'm sure she touched on this. The graphic in the top left-hand corner, quite a bit of concentrated detail. This is taken from the BC hydrogen study. It's quite recent. It was released in December 2019, publicly available if anyone on this forum this morning would like to check it out. This table summarizes both a conservative and aggressive scenario by 2050. And I actually can't see this slide because it's so small, but I think I remember it. Effectively, it looks at about 1,000 fuel cell electric vehicle refueling stations, I think 1 million FCEVs on the road, about 45% by volume of the gas in our provincial gas supply system, hydrogen. And this would require about 1.5 million tons of hydrogen produced per annum. While this is quite a grand vision, and there's a few key that present significant opportunity and challenges. There's a few key levers that we have in British Columbia to enable this, or enable hydrogen at scale. Provincial gas supply chain and our existing infrastructure, obviously, the same as many other jurisdictions around the world, and that we just heard this morning from Henri, leveraging our existing gas infrastructure right along the value chain, from storage, high pressure, right down to burner tip, is going to be key in affecting this transition. Here in Fortis, like I said, we're really at the start of this transition. So in addition, I'll speak to in a couple of slides, in addition to looking at what we will need to do to affect this transition, we're also thinking about how do we future-proof the infrastructure that we're currently building and planning to build for this new future. And it goes without saying, but I think I always need to say this to ground the conversation around hydrogen, but the transformation of the gas networks to enable a high hydrogen content, which is really what we're talking about here, it is quite a complex undertaking, no doubt about it. Another reason for this industrial collaboration, we need to make sure we do not repeat each other's work, that our investments are effectively streamlined to the extent possible to maximize value and effectively transition our energy supply regime. Next slide, please. I'm going to touch on what I call industry requirements, not just in BC, but in our region, right? So the graphic on the right-hand side, you can make out British Columbia, you can make out the light blue Fortis BC service territory, but the key message from this slide is, as I like to say, all the pipes are interconnected. Hydrogen molecules produced in northern BC, for example, will not recognize jurisdictional boundaries. They will pass through the gas grid, right? That's just a fact. So some of the key activities that in our region that we will need to move together will have to be scoped, thought about, executed on a regional basis. And in context of this morning's conversation, in terms of recertifying our infrastructure for hydrogen at scale, the development of regulations, codes, and standards that provide consistent guidance for safety and accommodating hydrogen in design and operation that spans jurisdictions. This is one of the key activities that I see actually some really positive movement in Canada right now. That's dovetailing really nicely with our federal strategy coming soon, and here in British Columbia, our provincial strategy. Collaboration will be required with other provinces in Canada, with the US to harmonize standards, codes, and regulations, as well as policy development. And this will need to include international collaboration. We need to fund research and develop and demonstrate for hydrogen-ready infrastructure and educate the public about the safety and efficacy of hydrogen for use as a fuel. And finally, I mentioned we have 1.2 million customers here in British Columbia. There are millions of customers connected at the grid edge on the screen you're looking at right now in our region. So we have a diversity of end users with varying tolerances for hydrogen that we'll need to be aware of. Next slide, please. Development progress. So Fortis has been planning around the development of hydrogen since about 2017. A couple of key points recently developed in 2020. So Fortis, including our partner local distribution companies and midstream operators here in British Columbia, we're planning a province-wide hydrogen feasibility study to investigate the extent to which hydrogen produced from renewable and low-carbon resources could be blended with natural gas to reduce the carbon intensity of energy delivered in British Columbia. So this initiative, it's at the pre-FEED conceptualization stage, but it's going to be one of the key activities over the coming years to really answer our questions, our need to knows around hydrogen in British Columbia. So in doing so, we tend to coordinate and assess the feasibility of recertifying the utilities natural gas supply chain to deliver hydrogen natural gas fuel blend. Next slide, please, where I'll touch in a little bit of detail on some of the core aspects of this feasibility study. So it's quite broad ranging, it's multifaceted. We want to identify and address the challenges of widespread supply of hydrogen. So mass market adoption of hydrogen, which again is one of the things we're talking about here to be successful with hydrogen at scale. The potential proponents of this provincial hydrogen study want to build a knowledge base to inform unknowns or knowledge gaps around safety, technical, economic, regulatory, innovation, research and development, capital investment, the full gambit of requirements needed to introduce and increase hydrogen blend concentration levels over time. This will also include looking at infrastructure where we can repurpose it to 100% hydrogen. We want to address these unknowns to support key internal and external stakeholder decision making, and we want to identify for ourselves the requirements and the work that will need to be completed in the near term and the longer term to ensure us, the utilities, our energy delivery networks and customers behind the meter end use equipment continues to operate safely and reliably. So finally, my last slide. Thank you, Patrick. So the objectives and goals. I mentioned hydrogen feasibility study because it's broad ranging, high level. It covers our province, all our infrastructure, just like we've heard mentioned this morning and like we see appearing in every other jurisdiction around the world. We will need to develop key demonstration or pilot projects around hydrogen. All the words on all the pages ever written will not prove hydrogen until we actually start deploying it in our infrastructure, supplying it to our customers, ensuring it is safe, economical to do so. So we're planning.
Thank you. I had a glitch in my connection. Thank you very much. I heard a lot of very interesting things by Mr. Quinn, especially very interesting are the harmonizations and regulatory codes and standards issues. I think one the things we need to do in our region. But now we have to go to Professor Brouwer, Jack Brouwer. He's a professor in mechanical engineering and aerospace engineering and the director of the Advanced Power and Energy Program at the University of California in Irvine. And I think we had the pleasure to meet each other, Jack, I think 1.5 years ago with our regional minister. Made a lot of impression. And may I give the word to you now, Jack?
Thank you very much. Interestingly, here in California, we still have a lot of people that don't understand how necessary hydrogen will be for achieving our zero emissions policy goals. And that's what my presentation is about, really. Why do we really need hydrogen? Next. Most people understand that we must have zero emissions in our energy future. And what they believe we can do is use 100% renewable electricity, electrify all end uses, and to use batteries to accomplish the intermittency, account for the intermittency and end uses of this renewable electricity. And they make arguments against hydrogen and fuel cell technology, like the fact that it's made mostly from natural gas today, like the fact that the round trip efficiency of a hydrogen energy economy is lower than the round trip efficiency of batteries, and that hydrogen is difficult to move around in society. People that are making these arguments are famous and very influential, like next, the second richest man in the world. Now, I admire Elon Musk very, very much, and he is doing great things that are essential for our zero emissions future. But he argues against hydrogen erroneously. Next. Interestingly, next, keep going pretty quickly here. I agree with most of these comments. They are just subtly untrue, and they don't tell the whole story. Next. We can't electrify all end uses. Next. We can only use batteries for some of the intermittency and some of the end uses. And next. Long duration hydrogen energy storage is actually more efficient than battery energy storage. And finally, we have done studies of our electric and gas systems. Next, and in an annual simulation, we can make it through the year with wind and solar energy, but we don't have enough storage in either our pumped hydro system, or if we made even all of our vehicles, battery electric vehicles, and only use them for grid storage. The only resource that is reasonably sized to enable a zero emissions electric grid is our gas grid. And this is how big it is from a storage of hydrogen perspective. And it's the only resource that can enable a 100% renewable electric grid. Next. It's also the only one that is capable, next, of doing seasonal storage, taking all of this renewable electricity in the middle of the year and converting it to the fall and winter. And it can do so more efficiently than batteries. Next. Batteries will never be big enough to accomplish 100% renewable in our electric grid. Next. We did the same analysis for the world, and we determined that it takes 20,000 terawatt hours of of energy storage for us to make it through the entire year with renewables only. Next. And keep going quickly. I like the way you're advancing the slides. We need 53 megatons of lithium and over 25,000 megatons of cobalt to make just the first battery to store all of that electricity. It's not even possible with all of the resources we have in the world. We have orders of magnitude too low resources to use the best batteries in the world for that. We should use them for cars. We should use them for power electronics like our cell phones and the like. We can't make batteries this big. We don't have enough resources on Earth. Next. And batteries used in utility applications end up showing very low round-trip efficiency. And it's mainly because they suffer from self-discharge. These are measurements from the California Self-Generation Incentive Program, where the average round-trip efficiency is 60%, which can be beaten by hydrogen energy storage systems. And it's mainly because they suffer from self-discharge. If you charge a battery and leave it stored for a while, you cannot get that energy back. You know this from your own automobiles. If you don't drive your car for a couple of months, the battery's dead. Not because it's a bad battery, it's because all batteries suffer from self-discharge and are not good for long duration storage like hydrogen is. Next. And the dynamics of meeting all of our energy needs with solar and wind inputs alone can definitely be followed by the electrolyzers and fuel cells, as we've shown in these simulations of wind power meeting the dynamics of an adjacent community. Next. And we've shown that you can store the hydrogen in things like salt caverns and have the temperature and pressure dynamics of the hour by hour, week by week, even seasonal storage of renewable electricity accomplished by renewable hydrogen. Next. But if you don't have a salt cavern, what do you have for moving the energy around in society and for storing? We have natural gas infrastructure. That's what we must transform in order to enable this zero emissions future. We've also looked at ports. And we had this thought experiment that we have analyzed in detail. Can we actually make whole ports zero emissions using the hydrogen vector? And it's quite abundantly clear that these kinds of port operations cannot be made zero emissions with electricity and batteries alone. Now, there are some battery applications, but the ships definitely can't do it that way. Next. The ships can't be long haul and heavy payload unless they have something that's lightweight and energy dense, like hydrogen, or hydrogen vectors like ammonia or methanol that's made from the renewable hydrogen that we know we can produce. And how much? Next. And how much hydrogen do we need? For the entire port of LA Long Beach, we need 8.9 million metric tons of hydrogen per year. And people think, whoa, can we make that amount? Can we make that amount? We just looked on offshore wind, okay? Offshore wind and just 3 farms on the offshore of California could completely decarbonize all of the ships, all of the trucks, everything going in and out of the Port of Long Beach. We have enough renewable resource and we can make renewable hydrogen from those resources. And when we make it at that scale, it's going to be cost effective. Next. Keep going past this slide, please. So I'm not the only one that's saying this. I have a bunch of colleagues all around the world, amazing scientists and researchers that have analyzed, can we really make zero net emissions energy systems without hydrogen? It's not possible. Hydrogen must be used for some of the vectors to accomplish our zero emissions future. And this is a science paper that we published on this point. And you see hydrogen playing a prominent role in making our economy zero emissions. Next. And I can't cover all of the features of hydrogen that make it essential for zero emissions, but we wrote a paper, and there's at least 11 reasons 11 reasons that we must adopt hydrogen and renewable hydrogen to achieve zero emissions. Next. So do we really need hydrogen? Hydrogen is essential for zero emissions. Next. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Brouwer. I think you touched upon some very interesting aspects, and especially the aspect of, let's say, non-believers or people who are hesitant to believe. And I think we need to spread the word. It's like we have to be hydrogen evangelists in some way, because the same arguments you are addressing rightfully are also coming up in the Netherlands. And you know, it's you need to have a solid explanation and a robust explanation, and you have to repeat it over and over again to make clear that we need hydrogen and that we can do it. And that's the main thing. You know, it's something we have to put on our forces together. We'll come to that later. I got a request from the organization that if there are parties listening and looking, please put your questions in the chat, and we can address them. But for now, I would like to continue to Mr. Rob Harvey. Mr. Rob Harvey is a director on the energy infrastructure for Cummins Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Technology, Cummins Incorporated. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And he is also former board chair of the Energy Storage Canada and currently serves as the board of the Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association. This is a very big mouthful, but we are very curious, Mr. Harvey, on your explanations on how Cummins and parties are looking upon hydrogen. May I give the word to you, please?
Great, thank you, Patrick. Welcome, everyone. I'm with Cummins, and today I'm going to talk about power to gas projects that we've worked on, and also some of the technologies that we bring to this space to produce renewable hydrogen. Just a brief introduction with Cummins. Some of you may be more familiar with hydrogenics in this space. Cummins acquired hydrogenics in September of 2019, and we're now part of the New Power group, which includes battery electric and fuel cell vehicles, and also hydrogen production. And we're based around the globe. And just highlight a couple things. We've got operations in California, and this is California and BC. I know, and looking at and Europe as well, for battery electric vehicles and integration of fuel cell electric vehicles, and also very active in Europe in manufacturing of electrolysis equipment in Belgium and fuel cells in Germany. Next slide. I'm not going to go through the whole slide, don't worry, but just to give you a snapshot of some of the products that we make. We make battery electric vehicle drivetrains for school buses, for example, and other vehicles. We've developed fuel cell compositions for zero emission trucks, buses, and trains, including the Karate Island shown there in 4. That's the world's first zero emission fuel cell train. And we also make large scale electrolysis equipment. And number 10 there I'll be talking more about is a Markham energy storage facility. Next slide, please. Power to hydrogen, we look at all of the applications. One of the things we've also done, we've covered projects with fueling, natural gas, both direct injection and methanation, and a growing interest in the production of green chemicals, green ammonia for energy transport and for fuel, and also green methanol to decarbonize chemical processes. The second part of power to hydrogen is the ancillary services. I'll be talking more about this, but using the dynamic response of an electrolyzer to provide grid services is an ancillary revenue stream for operators. Next slide, please. We've done over a dozen projects. Most of the projects have been in Europe. The largest one in North America is the joint venture that we've done with Enbridge. But 5 of the projects, when I looked at this, are related to power to gas, the original concept of using hydrogen to decarbonize the natural gas stream. Next slide. Just going to go back to a couple slides from one of the co-founders of the whole concept of power to gas was Dr. Michael Sterner in Germany. And what he modeled was looking at nature's way of storing energy. And photosynthesis is nature's way. It's actually relatively inefficient. It's got an efficiency of 1%. But all of the world's energy has been captured and stored this way. And move to the next slide, and that's really the model for power to gas. The original concept of power to gas was to use electrolysis to produce hydrogen from renewable sources, to methanize that with a carbon capture stream to produce renewable natural gas, and have a whole integrated cycle of capturing energy, using carbon as an energy carrier, and then releasing that carbon and capturing it again. So the original concept was a technical copy of photosynthesis. And in projects that we're working with, the companies that we're working with are looking at the full gambit. But on the power to gas side, looking at both producing renewable hydrogen as hydrogen and as a way of decarbonizing natural gas. Next slide. And I'm just going to run through a couple of projects I've been involved in. The wind gas project in Falkenhagen, this is a Uniper project in 2013, was the very first power to gas plant in the world. And we supplied 2 megawatts of electrolysis equipment for this project. It was developed in Falkenhagen in an area that is predominantly wind resources. So it's 100% renewable energy and was blending to a maximum percentage of 2%. And this project had a partner of Swiss Gas, which took a portion of the output, and also they are selling this renewable natural gas with a hydrogen blend as wind gas as a residential option for a premium product. Subsequently, this project has also been developed for a catalytic methanation project in a subsequent stage. Next slide, please. Another project we partnered with was with Electricea in Denmark for the Biocat Project. And this is one of the first biological methanation projects in the world that is capturing biogas waste from a wastewater stream, and upgrading the biogas to convert the CO2 in the biogas stream to renewable natural gas. Next slide. And the key ingredient here, besides renewable hydrogen, is microbes that basically consume that combination of CO2 and hydrogen in the process of heat and produce synthetic natural gas. And this demonstration project, one of the interesting things is that the archaea, or those microbes, can turn on and off. So if you're tied to a renewable energy source that is not producing all the time, these and that bright green, I've not seen the plant, but I've seen enough pictures and demonstrations to know when those microbes are active, that's their color. So they will ramp up and down with the renewable energy stream that is powering them. Next slide. This is a project we weren't involved with, but I think it's a fascinating project because those microbes that you could put in a plant also exist in underground reservoirs. And RAG, which is Austria's natural gas utility, has demonstrated producing renewable natural gas underground in existing sandstone reservoirs with the injection of CO2 and hydrogen to produce renewable natural gas. Now I'll talk about a project that's closer to home for me in Toronto. Next slide, please. This is the Markham Energy Storage Facility in Ontario. It's the first multi-megawatt renewable hydrogen project in North America, and it's been operating since May of 2018. It's a joint venture between Hydrogenics and Enbridge, and the initial application was providing regulation services for the IESO under contract. That's the grid operator in Ontario, and it's actually dispatched by the IESO. The second phase, which is well underway, is direct injection of that renewable hydrogen into the natural gas grid. And Enbridge has taken the lead on this. And even though it's a demonstration project, was required to do a leave to construct with the Ontario Energy Board. This is a rigorous public hearing process that took 11 months for the application, multiple interveners, asking the questions, environmental reviews, First Nations reviews, but on October 29th, received the go-ahead, a favorable ruling for going ahead with this project. That's important not just for the demonstration, because it sets the stage for larger scale commercial projects for blending, which are of interest to companies like Enbridge, Fortis BC, and really, if you look at the whole North America, this will be a benchmark demonstration project for gas utilities across North America. Some of the restrictions are the 2% blending initially, similar to what we've seen in Germany and other jurisdictions. And also there were some special considerations because Enbridge's demonstration is blending into distribution gas lines, which is more challenging than doing a transmission line because of the gas flows for that. But it actually broadens the application of direct injection of renewable hydrogen into the gas grid because it can be done in many more places. Next slide. This, I'm going to briefly talk about the frequency regulation. This is the dispatch of the plant. The capacity of the plant is 2.5 megawatts. The dispatch is on 2.1 megawatts. And you can see this is the signal that we get from the ISO. So an AGC signal is sent every 2 seconds. And on the next slide, it shows the overlay of the set point in green with the response. So the reason this is interesting is because, as I mentioned, an additional revenue stream, the dynamic response of an electrolyzer is extremely fast. So you could use this for a portion of the capacity of a plant and augment the revenues while producing renewable hydrogen for power to gas. Next slide. Just very briefly, the development of the PEM electrolysis, which is our product platform for large-scale electrolysis, covers 20 years. And the Markham facility was our first indoor facility, and that informed the development of our 5 megawatt Hylizer 1000 platform, 1,000 normal meters cubed per hour, or 2,000 kilograms per day nominal output. And that plant development, our first commercial deployment, is a 20 megawatt plant with Air Liquide in Quebec that's being commissioned today. Next slide. I think that's it for me, but that gives you a highlight of some of the projects with power to gas. We see with the utilities that we've worked with tremendous interest in renewable hydrogen for decarbonizing gas grids, and this project with Enbridge is really going to be a pathfinder sort of project in North America to help open this up for Enbridge and many other utilities as well. Thank you.
Apologies, I was still muted. Not mute, but muted. Thank you, Mr. Harvey, for this elucidation. Also, thank you to the other speakers. We have received some questions. We could address them. But what my first response is that there are so many similarities between, let's say, our side of the ocean and your side of the ocean, that it would make sense to intensify collaborations. That's what I think, because if you look at our region, I think Henri touched upon that, we are located at this very big energy park called the North Sea. And I think looking at California and British Columbia, your energy park is the Pacific and adjacent region. So it makes a lot of sense, and probably also in the southern parts of the United States due to the high solar intensities. This makes a lot of sense to team up, and especially looking at, let's say, aspects like developing the chain, addressing, of course, as Mr. Brouwer said, addressing the holy grail, that's the storage issue. The storage makes it all possible and is a competitive advantage towards batteries. We need to explain that far more, which from my perspective isn't explained enough. But don't want to talk too much myself, because that's not the role of the moderator, of course, but still, if I have the opportunity, I will do so. I think RCS, regulatory codes and standards, as addressed by Mr. Quinn, are very important. The technology, as Mr. Harvey said, is there. There is no reason why we couldn't do it. And Mr. Brouwer said, with the just explanation, it makes a lot of sense. And we all are doing this. And as Henri also addressed, this major investment plan in our region really gives us a tremendous momentum. So it is a question of scale up and speed up. Otherwise, we'll be too late, and all the technologies will come from China, and that's not what we want, to be honest, more or less. But I have a question received that's addressing the differences in North America versus Europe when it comes to the availability or advantage of the gas network. I think it's about unlocking the potential of the natural gas grid and refurbishing or repurposing that to hydrogen. And are there policies in the United States or Canada, let's say, which give an advantage to green or blue hydrogen, or don't make a distinction in that? Who can I give the word? Mr. Brouwer?
Yeah, I'll make a couple of comments on that. In every region, the transformation of the gas grid is a very complex issue. And I think John made that point very clear here. And yet, the transformation does not require new science. We know how to actually transform it. It just ends up being complicated because every jurisdiction has different kinds of pipeline materials. Everyone has different kinds of regulators and valves and compressors, but it's not rocket science. And that's the reason why it's going to be one of the most cost-effective ways to engender these features of moving energy around in society and storing massive quantities of energy, renewable energy. It's going to be the cheapest because it's not rocket science that is required for transforming the natural gas system. But it's complex, so we must invest in it to do this.
Hold on. Okay, so no rocket science. You can do it. If you can go to the moon and back, you could certainly make this transition. Okay, thank you. John, do you have a comment on the suggestions and the remarks of Professor Brouwer?
I would agree with Professor Brouwer's comments. I would just nuance it by saying I think we as an industry here in North America are right at the start of the transition in terms of understanding what will the investment required be, how will we manage the change, what's the enabling policy, what's the roadmap around that. We know what our vision is, we know where we need to get to by 2050 or sooner. I think there is a need for clarity around the roadmap, how to get there. And hopefully here in Canada and Western Canada, we're going to get that really soon with the federal hydrogen strategy and our provincial hydrogen roadmap.
Okay, let me touch upon. Thank you very much. Let me touch upon another issue. If you develop such a value chain, it's a new value chain. It's not rocket science, but it's a new value chain: production, transformation, or logistics and use in industry, mobility, built environment, etc. Looking at, let's say, profitable applications, what would be the most profitable application to start with? Would it be chemicals? Henri, could you elucidate on that? You're muted.
Myself, I see interest in green hydrogen, but also with a penalty, because the off-takers of chemicals, are they willing or not to pay a green interest for the production of green chemicals. So I don't think that the chemical industry by itself, maybe some parties can do that. For example, biojet fuel. You can't produce biojet fuel based on gray hydrogen, for example. It's not very wise to do. So I think for biojet fuel there will be an incentive to use green hydrogen. But for the major part of the chemical industry, I don't think that will be the case. I think the driver, as far as I can see from my perspective in the region that I work in, is the transport sector. So hydrogen as a fuel for cars, buses, etc. That is, if you look at the prices that for that kinds of industry parties are willing to pay, I think that is the driver for this development for green hydrogen. And I think the price of green hydrogen has to decrease over time to be competitive to gray hydrogen, which is nowadays widely used in the chemical industry.
And it will. In the very same way that the price of sun and wind power and batteries have come down in price, as long as we invest just as substantially. Our analysis of the cost curves show these technologies are just on the high end of it, and they're coming down, down, down. If we make that big of an investment, the cost is going to come down. Absolutely.
Okay. I think we're running towards the end of the seminar. I just had one question. It's a big task before us, but so we can do it technology-wise, we can do it intellectually-wise, because it's not rocket science. You need to work hard. That's what we need to do. But what about the financing? Is the financing a bottleneck, or would you say isn't the bottleneck? And may I ask that to Rob, elucidate, and then go to Jack, and then John, and then Henri, and then we'll be at the end of the webinar.
Very good. Thanks, Patrick. I think I would agree with Henri. When you look at the different applications for renewable hydrogen, the transport sector is the closest to having a use case, an economic use case that's bankable. It's very close, and there are a number of. It doesn't just take a government legislation. There are a number of companies in North America that want to have zero emission fleets and are prepared to make the investments to see those out. I think the area that we're talking about today in terms of power to gas and renewable natural gas using electrolytic hydrogen, that one is to be baked into a rate base. I think is the line of sight to make the economics of that work, and certainly at smaller injection volumes, that is something that the rate base for natural gas, because it's such an enormous source of energy, is could be absorbed quite readily.
Okay, Jack.
Yes, I agree with the previous comments. I do think that there is a part of the reason why these entities are pretty cost effective is that the fuel is valuable itself, but there also are policies in place that are both providing carrots and sticks for them to invest in zero emissions technologies. And this is why there's a need for policies to be put in place also on the grid and in other applications to enable a little bit of investment incentives for the adoption of these zero emission technologies, but also to demand zero emissions in all applications. So I think there is still a need for some policy framework to enable these things to become bankable.
Okay. John.
I agree. From our modeling and some of our the business cases we're seeing developed here in British Columbia, that for renewable hydrogen, reduction in capex to build large scale facilities, 100 megawatt or more power to gas facilities, and the cost of power, the two key drivers. So while capex costs will likely reduce over time as more plants are built, it will need to be followed up with policies that support lower cost power available to drive these facilities to produce economic or affordable green hydrogen.
Okay, so Henri, do you agree on that?
Yeah, totally. And if you look at the Dutch contest, I think one major thing to address is also subsidies that apply for all kinds of gases. For example, in the Netherlands, you have this SDE subsidy scheme on biomethane, but that conflicts also with the production of hydrogen. So that's also, well, maybe not for this hour, but also a topic to be addressed.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Henri, Jack, John, and Rob, and thank you, Karen, for being so patient with me, because you can't blame the speakers, you have to blame me. Thank you, and now let me give the word to Karen, and Jack, Henri, Rob, and John. Thank you very much for partaking. Karen, the word is yours.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you guys for a fabulous session. You were perfectly on time and great presentations. I like the fact that Henri tried to throw a wrench into all of our plans at the very last second. So thank you for that. More food for thought. My takeaway from today's sessions is that one thing that John Quinn said is do not try to reproduce each other's work. Work together, but also that there is momentum, but also a sense of urgency. I can tell from all of you that this is the moment to get started. So I'm very happy with today's sessions. I think we did a great job. Looking forward to the following session. So thank you to all of our speakers for today. Just a couple of announcements. We're broadcasting live on this platform that we've called the Energy and Climate Community Platform, which is really more than just viewing these sessions. So please take a look at what the platform offers. You can connect and browse through all of the other participants. You can connect directly with them through the platform, and we'll be exploring this tomorrow in some more depth. The goal of this whole mission and the coming weeks and months is to build out this community platform and to provide more content and develop more workshops related along these themes. So I've already heard a couple today that could be topics for further discussion and really try and build out the partnerships in a more practical manner. We will look at that more tomorrow. Tomorrow's sessions start again at 8 o'clock. And then the theme will be tomorrow more looking at the harbors, logistics of harbors, but also heavy duty transport. So we've talked a lot about transport. We've talked a lot about heavy duty transport, trucking. We're going to be looking at that more in depth tomorrow. Tomorrow's session starts again on the platform that you're viewing us live on, or the Twitter that you're viewing us live on. That's it from the consulate. And thank you all, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.